So I'd like to discuss a few things that I feel like may be lost. I don't know if lost is the right word. Lost is not the right word, but no, I'm not speaking to you. If you have young people around, if you have teens around, please gather them, because I'd like to dispel a few things that were unavailable to me when I was their age, and what up, Big D? When I was their age, and I think it's really, really important. Hey, friends, I think it's really, really important that we start really making it our business to do intergenerational bridging with our young people, to really just get understanding, even if it's at the same time. All right. So on a basic level, I see a lot of people saying, well, none of the Democrats voted for this bill, so what's the problem? And what we have to understand is that we can't keep looking at each bill passing in its own little world. We can't keep looking at each bill, each act, etc., passing as if it is in a vacuum, because we understand that they are a part of larger efforts. Yes, absolutely, intercontinental bridging. I completely agree with you on that, because they are a part of larger efforts, right? Like, they are not just individual things. Oftentimes, there will be bills that are presented to make room for other bills, right? There will be bills that are presented to kind of like wear people down. All right, so let me give you an example, right? So you'll see in the past, Martin Luther King, before he would go to certain towns, he knew they was going to act up, right? So what he would do is he would send goons ahead of time. And the goons would act up and basically make the cops and them kind of scuffled up. So that by the time he got there, they was like, oh, finally, an easy black. So that is something that happens with these bills. They'll create bills that are like super bazonkers, but then knowing that people are going to be like, that was crazy. And then come with a bill after that is that looks lighter. But it's not that it's lighter. It's just that they hit you with something so crazy that now when you got something that was a little lighter, it feels like it's not as bad. Okay? So we're going to get to that Fox's Cub. So I want to point that out. The Overton window. Thank you, Kiranarius, which sounds like a Game of Thrones name. So two, I think it's really important to acknowledge that when we talk about all the Dems voted, well, we actually did not get all the Dems voting. So all of the Dems that were elected did not vote because 3 of them was dead. 3 of them was dead. And they did not replace their seats before they died. And so the vote passed by only 2 votes. Had there actually been 3 Democrats in those seats, it would have passed. When we talk about the collusion, so write down collusion if you're not sure what it means. Write down collusion so you can look it up. When we talk about the collusion, what we're saying is that there is efforts that happen on the Democrat side that allow for these types of things to happen by the Republicans that shouldn't happen. Ultimately, the Democrats as a party should, one, be making sure that nobody who is not able to be in their seat is in their seat. And 2, we should be making sure that anyone who has vacated their seat is immediately replaced. So let's start with that. I want to let you all know that anybody in here who is in defense of Democrats, I will not respond to you. I am not interested in your insights or opinions. It is completely irrelevant to me. The third thing I want to point out is the reality that this binary of Democrats and Republicans is simply impractical. We know that the United States is made up of far more unique and different perspectives and experiences than simply two sides of a coin. In that same voice, we have to acknowledge that it is frightening that a bill that is so devastating to so many people could pass with only 2 votes. That's a simple majority versus a major majority. When we look at things like this, we are saying, oh, these are aspects of the system that need to be changed. Now, one thing I want to point out is that the way that Congress operates is actually very confusing. And the House and the Senate run differently. And they make different rules at the beginning of every session. So it's very difficult to keep up, honestly, with what the rules of this session is versus that session. And sometimes it's like, wait, are we allowing filibustering this time? Are we not allowing? Is it a simple majority? Is it a unanimous vote? Like, what is this? And so when we see these things, we understand that the confusion is by all means meant to confuse us. Okay? Thank you, Seductive. The confusion is meant to confuse us. And then we have folks that come on mainstream television and they're considered political analysts, which in my opinion is no different than a sports analyst, in that they're really just doing a lot of talking about the things that are going on, but not necessarily educating. So for instance, if I'm watching a sports show and I don't know what a nickel defense is, and they say, man, they should have ran the nickel defense, like, it's going to be up to me to look that up. But most people simply won't watch that programming because they really just don't need to know. Now, this person keeps bringing up Boldy James, and I am not quite sure why. It is no secret that I used to date Boldy James. It is absolutely untrue that I lost him money, and anything else that you are looking to hear from me about it is not going to happen right now. We're focused on real things that change real lives, which is the reality of our government. Back to the lecture at hand. We're talking about the binary of Democrats and Republicans, and so often people think that if you are challenging the Democrats, that somehow that means you are going along with Republicans. And I think what's really important is that we have to acknowledge the fact that if we cannot challenge who is supposed to be representing us, who says they're representing us, then we are no more than members of a cult. Okay? We are no more than members of a club that we have paid to be in to have no say in. That is not helpful. What is in the big, beautiful bill is an immense amount of problematic things, okay? And I can't honestly even run all of it down because it is so deeply problematic. On a headline, 17 million people will lose access to Medicaid. We have a huge amount of people, I don't know the number off the top of my hand, that will lose access to the SNAP benefits. We have the budget for ICE expanding from $3 billion to $48 billion. And with that money, there will be efforts to expand, of course, an actual police force specifically for ICE, which we know means that there is going to be an actual secret police. They're not even going to be secret. There's just going to be basically a government-run police force. So when I see folks saying, well, the Democrats voted, so why are you mad? That was in response to me getting a text, a legitimate text, by the way. I don't need to go for Republicans too. I want to make this clear. One of the most essential parts of resistance, one of the most essential parts of activism and organizing is using your energy wisely. So when you use your energy wisely, you make your decision to use it in the places where you have the most leverage. That is the most effective way to use your energy. If Democrats are saying, we want women like you, Amanda, a black woman, to stand for us, then that is going to be the place I have the most leverage. All right? For instance, Republicans are in no way saying that they want anything from me. So therefore, we have no leverage. I have nothing to stand on. They are very clearly stating, we are racist, we are capitalists, we are going to drain you all for everything you've got. However, Democrats are the ones saying, we're not that. We're not that. We're not that. So if you're saying we're not that, and you're also sending me multitudes of texts that are not scams, that are legitimate texts asking for my money, then that is the place where I have the most leverage. Now, let's talk about Zionists. A lot of individuals do not know about what Zionists, they are not privy yet to the infiltration of Israeli money and influence into our government. So there's a lot of arguing and a lot of posturing and a lot of conversations that happen around politics that do not have that very important aspect involved, and it makes those conversations moot. It makes them completely irrelevant. It's like talking about Destiny's Child and not mentioning that there were 4 members and 3. Like, you don't know the history, so you're not having a real conversation, okay? You can't have these types of, you can't have a full analysis without full information. So if we're going to really, in 2025, have a real, true analysis of the government of the United States, and of course, there are many other analyses and many other activist movements and many other organizing spaces that we need to be a part of. However, in this particular analysis of the government, it is not possible for us to do so without acknowledging the bipartisan infiltration of Israeli political action funds into our government. AIPAC is simply the biggest name, but it is not the only one. And the truth is that there are incredible amounts of money that are filtered into our government to make sure that certain people stay wealthy, that certain policies pass in order to keep Israel running a certain way. And all of this is really ignored when we talk about Democrats. But Democrats are absolutely a part of this in many ways. It is 1,000,000% an active effort on both ends. Okay? And when we hear people say, Amanda can't represent foundationally Black Americans, I want you to understand something. I don't care. I need to make this abundantly clear. I do have dual citizenship. I don't care. I don't need to represent foundationally Black Americans. I represent individuals with values. I represent individuals that want to make sure that we are moving with the most strength that we can. I represent folks that are intellects. I represent folks that have a heart. I couldn't give a rat's ass if I don't represent foundational Black Americans. I'm not here to represent foundational Black Americans. My mother is an immigrant, okay? My mother is an immigrant. So I needed to make it abundantly clear. You can get who you want to represent foundational Black Americans. I am a part of a legacy of Black radicals. And those Black radicals include folks from all different backgrounds, right? I'm from a legacy of radicals. And those radicals include people from all different backgrounds. And that's what it's actually going to take to see any type of shift in the future. And I want you all to know that the shift that you're talking about is going to happen in order for people to have a future for their children. Now, this person here says, stop speaking for Black Americans. I am a Black American. I am the descendant of chattel slavery in Black America. And for the record, I can speak for whoever the fuck I want to. I speak for myself. What you don't have to do is be here to listen. So, back to what we were discussing. Israel gets a literal stipend from the United States of billions and billions and billions of dollars that allow for them to have free healthcare. They have free, what's what I'm looking for? Free education. They are able to have and possess their dual citizenship so that they can fly to wherever they need to fly. You want to say hi? Say hi. Okay. So they can fly wherever they need to fly when Israel acts up. So when people are saying to me, well, the Democrats did this and the Democrats did that. If the Democrats are not actively working to stop the American dollar from traveling across the ocean to Israel, then the Democrats are not working in your best interest. And I'm sorry, but there aren't enough Democrats that are working to do that. We literally only saw, 14 or 18 Democrats sign a piece of paper the other day to say, let's not send any more money to Israel. 14 to 18. There are 212 Democrats in the House right now. Speaker Jeffries sending a text out that says, send us more money so we can overturn the Republicans. I'm honestly disgusted by this for a myriad of reasons. $1 billion was raised for Kamala Harris. And with those billions of dollars, what they did not do was expand. Instead, what they did was try to go to the center. Now, what we can look at with Zohran Mamdani's campaign so far is that he actually had a significant less amount of money than his competitor. However, he was able to be successful because he aligned with individuals, with groups, with organizations that actively are already working. They already have networks of people who are in resistance work. They already have networks of people who want to be a part of coalition building, of community building, etc. So when we are seeing that work in real time, there's no reason to continue to support this effort of just give us your money and let us do what we want to do with it. That is no longer viable. It's impractical. And the consistent effort of Democrats in the past 3 days to put their time, their voices, and their energy towards speaking against Zohran Mamdani instead of educating us, the masses, on how this bill is working, instead of actually stating the ways in which this bill is going to harm, is really problematic. Now, I think there's also something really important that we need to point out. When these bills are being voted on, it is not simply just an individual decision. Many of these individuals are actually a part of exactly a party, okay? They are a part of a party. And we see that the Republicans are a very staunch party in terms of the fact that they stick together. That has been the case except for on this bill. There has been some folks that are like, nah, we ain't really with it. We ain't really with it. So they have had to curry favor. They have had to whip votes. It's called whipping up votes, okay? So the whipping of votes that has been going on doesn't just stop because they're in the chamber. When Hakeem Jeffries sat up there and quote unquote filibustered, I only put it in quotes because his filibuster actually allowed more time for Mike Johnson to continue to whip up votes. So this is, I'm going to say this one time to this real remotely review. You asking me what I'm going to do in the same breath that you just told me I don't speak for foundational Black Americans is exactly why anyone who is aligning themselves with being foundational Black American at this point is playing themselves. Because you can't simply just kick me out and then ask for my help. That's not how it works. You can't ostracize me and then turn around and be like, okay, but like, can you give us input? That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works. And so you can stay here. However, you are not going to get anything from me. Okay? Now, the truth about Democrats is that we, as a people who don't consider ourselves Democrats, have to understand that the Democrats and the Republicans, my shirt says my mother is an immigrant. The Democrats and the Republicans were never created as oppositional parties. The Democrats and the Republicans were created in a nation where Black people were still enslaved. The parties that were present at the time of the Civil War were the Whigs and the Democrats. The Republicans were Lincoln's party. And they came through, and the Republicans were a party that was made up of a motley crew of people that, for various reasons, just wanted slavery to end. And it wasn't all for positive reasons. Like, it wasn't all because they were like, Black people shouldn't be enslaved. All right? Some of it was literally because they were just like, well, the slave owners are getting more money. So if the slave owners are getting more money, then we're not going to get more money. And so that was a part of what we call interest convergence. Interest convergence is when, even if your interests and my interests are for different reasons, if they align, then we can converge to be a force. So the Democrats were already in the position of power. There was the Whigs, and then you had the Republicans who had interest convergence to create coalition that said, we are going to challenge this institution of slavery. And they eventually were able to get in power. And then we see the Civil War happen. We see on the other side of the Civil War, Reconstruction. A lot of people don't know enough about Reconstruction to understand that that was an opportunity for things to change in the nation, and it didn't happen. I am of a theory that we are going to find ourselves within my lifetime in another scenario of Reconstruction, where the nation is going to come back to the table to look at the Constitution and decide what it wants to be. During the first Reconstruction, the problem was they let the Confederacy come to the table, even though they were no longer Confederates because they got beat, but they were literally committing treason, but they let them come back to the table, and they got to be a part of creating the new version of America post-Civil War. That version of America was made up of Republicans and Democrats. And within the time frame of the post-Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement, there were Republicans and Democrats. And during that time frame, we saw the rights that Black people had gained on the other side of the Civil War slowly and, well, not slowly, but effectively stripped away. Black people didn't just go from slavery to Jim Crow. No, there was a moment in time where you saw Black people being able to get into government, where you saw Black people being able to get into positions of economic flourishing, etc. And we have seen over the expanse of that early portion of the century, those things get taken away as the more you saw Black folks getting in power. Not even getting in power. The more you saw Black folks getting on their feet. And then Jim Crow apartheid comes in. Okay? Now, the reason I'm giving you all this backstory is because America does not exist in a vacuum. And it is really frightening to me how many folks think that. They think that this election was going to save this. They think that an election that happened last year was going to stop the efforts that have been in motion from the beginning of this nation. Okay? We see the xenophobia that happens as divide and conquer takes place. We see the effort that is being made right now to convince people that they can't be, quote unquote, deported, even though we know that deportation is literally just a word that they're just bastardizing. And we have seen them bastardize so many words. Words like woke, critical race theory, woman. Like, they just decided it does what it does when they do it what it do. Deportation at this point just means detainment. That's all it means. And they just passed a precedent in the Supreme Court that said that Donald Trump and his administration can detain any American anywhere. Actually, that may be wrong. They can deport any immigrant to anywhere. They can deport any immigrant to anywhere. So this brings us back to the beginning of what I was saying. And I hope you guys are still with me. And the beginning of what I was saying was that we see bills that happen as lily pads to other bills, right? These things are not just one-offs that happen and then are done. They happen to create more possibility for more things to happen. What this big, beautiful bill does is it essentially creates a huge chasm between the haves and have-nots. And it's going to be about whether the have-nots are going to be able and are going to be willing to put themselves through that chasm to close it. Are we going to be able to build a bridge with ourselves across that chasm to get to the other side? So when I see folks looking at this immigration stuff, it's the same tactic as what happens in the House and the Senate. The Supreme Court passing these bills, the Supreme Court passing these laws and not passing laws, but allowing for the precedent and the shifting of laws to make it easier for immigrants to be deported is simply just moving the wheel further to create a larger element of criminality. It's to create a larger element of criminality. And a larger element of criminality allows there to be more people in prison, which allows for there to be more slave labor. And cheap labor makes people rich. So the conversation here about Democrats is really important because I think not enough understand that the Democrats also want to be rich. The Democrats are being donated to by other companies, other lobbyists that also want to be rich. And I don't think enough of us want to or are willing to acknowledge that power and money is enough for some people to do the worst of things to other people. We want to believe for some reason that these elected officials have a higher level of morality, a higher level of ethics. However, they have never demonstrated that in a large number. It is like policing. The actual system itself attracts individuals who are not here to lead, here to engage, here to help, but more so attracts individuals who are there to be opportunists. And so we have to collectively change our way of looking at government and our way of looking at what we want for government. And that is why I asked you all to bring your teens here to listen or to send this to your teens, because they are going to be the ones who are going to be shifting that in real time. And what we are going to have to do is to support them in doing it. What we are going to have to do is to use our wisdom and experience to help support their innocence and their rigor. And too many of us are so stuck in our own ignorance and our own unwillingness to expand that we cannot be effective in the things that need to be changed. When I see people arguing or coming into my comments really defending Democrats, I say these are individuals who unfortunately have only gotten their information from mainstream media. And do you know who is behind mainstream media? The same corporations and lobbyists that are behind Democrats. And so we begin to understand that mainstream media is also not here to inform us. They are here to persuade us. In other nations, they are so aware of the role their media and their politicians play. And one of the things that we have to do in this nation is to become aware. I know there are people that say, well, what would you do differently, Amanda? What would you do differently, Amanda? Well, first of all, I'm not running for office because I do not want to be a part of a corrupt system. And nobody that I look up to or that I have charted my path on has been in office. So I don't see that as a necessary place for me to put my energy. My energy is in educating folks that want to see a better life for themselves and for their future. And they may not be able to leave the United States. They may not want to leave the United States. However, it is imperative that we understand that there is a different way that we can exist. Now, someone here said you advocated for Zoran. And I think what's interesting about that is that what I've advocated for is I've advocated for truth. And I'm not going to sit idly by and allow for there to be weaponization, particularly of Black people and their racial classification for the sheer effort of lies. I will not allow that. If it means that it is correcting a mistruth about an individual, so be it. Now, when I was doing that and saying that about Kamala, they were like, oh my gosh, you're trying to ruin her career. You're trying to ruin her campaign. That's not the case. I exist for truth and justice. That is why I have a tattoo of the Egyptian goddess of Ma'at on my wrist. So, no, I have not advocated for Zoran. What I have advocated for is actual fairness, transparency, and honesty being given to voters. And not people like Al Sharpton and Representative Clyburn using their influence as older Black men to lie on behalf of Cuomo. That is dishonest, and that is misleading and manipulative. And I will not support that. So, for anyone here who is suggesting solutions, I want to inform you that there are no solutions to this at present. There is no lever that's going to be pulled that's going to save you. And to suggest that I should have the solutions versus the people that you've elected is really indicative of where we are, of how we got to where we are. There's a deep demand for me, an unpaid individual just using her time, wisdom, and knowledge to inform people on the internet, to have the solution of how to fix the problem. However, that same energy is simply not extended to the elected officials who have health care. You're not going to have health care. You may not have health care, but they have health care. To the elected officials who your tax money is paying. Okay? Those people are literally called representatives because they are supposed to represent the will of their constituency, the needs of their constituency. So when Lisa Murkowski, the senator in Alaska, got them to carve out an exception of the Medicaid cuts from Hawaii and Alaska, that was because she knew that her constituency was going to suffer, and that if her constituency suffered, they would not reelect her. It wasn't altruistic, and thus she had them carve out a protection solely for her state, while allowing the rest of the United States to have to suffer the brunt. Now, what happens on the other side of a loss of health care and a loss of government assistance? That's a real question. So Papa Puff says civil unrest. Star Power says death and elimination. Umaira says a hot mess. Any color you like says homelessness. Who gonna know I to know? Debt says death. Mary Lynn says the poor get poorer. Poverty and increased morbidity. People live on the street. Desperation. And what is a byproduct of all of these things? There it is. Asham 3DOW. Unrest and crime hikes. Unrest and crime hikes. Once crime goes up, there's Last Queen. Once crime elevates, policing elevates. The prison industrial pipeline expands. This nation was built on slave labor. It will continue to exist on slave labor. And so the best thing that you can do in this time, and I've been saying this now for a year, is to identify what are your needs that are not, what are your needs that are provided by the government? Where are those needs going to be met if the government isn't meeting them? How will they be met? Are there organizations that already work to help people like you? I've been saying this now for at least over a year. That you are going to have to understand that this government was barely helping you and absolutely doesn't want to anymore. And in the government not helping you, you will be forced to be in community. And the solution for community is getting over yourself. We also have to understand that there are police and members of ICE that we should not be allowing to have community with us. There has to be morality in our resistance in order for it to be effective. There has to be an ostracizing of individuals who are harming. We live in a nation where we will literally allow for politicians to pass policies that harm us and still welcome them to the church. We as a society will allow for the pedophiles in our family to still come and hang out. We have allowed for priests who have harmed children to continue to stand up in front of the church. We do not have a moral code. We allow for the drug dealers in our community to continue to sell drugs. I will say that I am ashamed that when I dated hustlers and they would say, well, if I don't sell it, somebody else gonna get it. I would allow that rhetoric to make sense to me. When ultimately it's well, no, actively it doesn't need to be sold. Actually, it doesn't need to be sold. So, when we see, I see folks say things like leftist ideals, etc. To be quite honest, a lot of this shit is not even about leftist ideals. It's just common sense. It's just common sense. And when we call it leftist at this point, we allow for there to be an effort to ignore it, or to poo-poo it, or to say, that's too much for me. But ultimately, it's not. There's nothing radical about what we're talking about. We're going to end up having to go back to simplicity. we're here in this digital space, and I will tell you that we've never seen fascism with a digital space, and that is true, but we've also never seen resistance with a digital space at this point. That is also true. We're going to have to go back to pen and paper. We need to get back into... No, I know what you meant, Fabian, but I think that unfortunately, like, people see leftists as a bad thing. We're going to have to go back to being in spaces. I'll be doing my one-woman show, What Would the Ancestors Say, for free at the People's Forum on August 2nd, Saturday, August 2nd in New York City. Bring your teenagers. Bring your children who are elevated and can sit for two hours and listen. Bring them. From this point forward, anything that I'm doing for free is going to actively need to include our teens. And if you have teens, you need to be actively including them in these conversations. So there is no, so you don't have a plan. No. Do I have a plan on how to shut down fascism that's been 60 years in the making? No. Carmdel 9, I will not do What Would the Ancestors Say and charge the audience. If there are organizations that have a budget to pay me to do the show, so be it. But I will not do What Would the Ancestors Say I won't charge the audience. So that's just how it's going to be. I am very committed to the role that I play in all of this is education. And so, the stuff that I'm doing for adults, for instance, like my Patreon and the Amandaseales Summit and I'll start teaching classes and things like that. Like, yes. But as for What Would the Ancestors Say? No. I would like for organizations, museums, education spaces that have budgets to bring programming, they are who need to pay me, not the public. We're literally paying taxes that ends up getting dispersed to all of these organizations in order to create programming that is for the purpose of public consumption. So why do I need to charge the public? Will it be available via streaming for those not near New York? Yes. So, oh, Jordy, are you scared of the thunders? Oh my gosh, are you scared of the thunders? Yes, it's very scary. I know, it's very scary, Jordies. The thunders is very scary. Oh, my Jordies. My Jordies is very scary. He's very scared of the thunders. I'm sorry. I'm scared of the thunders too. Oh, thank you. Me too, not a ledge. Want your chewy? Here, take your chewy. No, come over here with it. What do you want, Bubs? You okay? He's thinking of something, but I don't know what he's thinking of. He is a good boy. And Val, you do know it all. Val really do be knowing it all, though. She be correcting y'all all the goddamn time. So I only came on here because I just couldn't help myself. Like, the nonsense was just so overwhelming. And I said, again, and the neurodiverge in me is always going to just believe that this is nonsense because people just don't know. So once I tell them, they'll know. Yes, I'm supposed to be on break. And no, Lando passed away, Jen. Lando passed away a few months ago. I hope to bring the show all over the nation, but people are going to have to bring me there to do it. And what would the ancestors say is an incredible piece of work that I believe is a necessary part of the canon that I want folks to take part in. And I'm going to be doing my best to, thank you, Jen. I'm going to be doing my best to bring it to as many places as I can. They haven't put it up there yet, probably because they haven't created the link yet. Nonetheless, it's, it's like July 4th. It's like, it's like the world don't start, like in the United States, like July don't start till after July 4th. So if you haven't listened to my podcast, Small Doses Podcast, especially the last few episodes have been super duper informative in really helping to contextualize our times. We've had some really great individuals on the show, whether it's Dana Lynn Knuckles, aka the People's Oracle, here on Instagram. We also had Claudia de la Cruz of the PSL and IFCO. We had Afeni. What's Afeni's last name? Afeni Evans, aka at Facts on Fire. We are talking about socialism. We're talking about being young, black, and radical. We're talking about the side effects of mysticism. We had Mehdi Hassan on. I think that premiered today, right? The Mehdi episode, side effects of mainstream media. And I think all of these episodes are really great because I'm just so lucky to have access to some of the great minds of our time, and they are available to you as well. So make sure you check out Small Doses Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also, Small Doses Podcast is completely independent now. So I went from making bank with my podcast to making 2 cents, $2 and cents. And we are really looking forward to Wendigard asked, will I have my astrology person on again one day? Oh, I gotta tell Laura Chung. I will let her know that you said that you asked that. No, I am not religious. How much do you charge to book me for shows? It depends on who's asking. I am going to watch the documentary on Zateo. You can fundraise after the fires. Where are you based? That's part of the depends on who's asking thing. Thank you, Carmdale9. Why the drop in money from the podcast? Because I was a part of a network. And so once you're independent, you're not getting access to like the same ad dollars as like everybody that's a part of the network. So you're just you're like individual podcast is trying to get ad dollars. So it takes time to kind of get that up. After the fires, are you in LA? Will I come out with another clothing line? Probably not. I didn't like it. I didn't like doing it. I'm not really interested in yeah, Mark Maron. After the fires, send an email to VFAL. It stands for Views from Manland, but VFAL at Smart, Funny, and Black. Okay, so I'd love you to talk to my daughter's Black Student Union organization. Here's the thing. A lot of times people want me to come places and they want me to do things and do everything for free. And the thing about it is that I just can't. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just can't. Someone just said, are you selling your house? Are you moving out of the country like all the other celebs? That's funny. First of all, you should know by now that I'm not like the other celebs. So you can start there. Will you do What Would the Ancestors Say Christmas cards this year? That sounds like a really good idea. I wouldn't do Christmas cards, but I would do Kwanzaa cards. What do I think New York will be like if Zoran wins? You know, listen, I don't believe that it's going to be like overnight everything is some brand new day. It's not going to be like at the end of The Wiz. Can you feel a brand new day? It's just not going to be that, right? But what I do think is, oh really, Hamid? Okay, I'm on it. But what I do think is that, and this is what anyone who studies history knows, is that what seems like one individual just happening ends up being a ripple effect, right? It ends up having the ability to reverberate. And that has been happening in the worst of ways in what we've seen. So, oh my God, Scotland. By the way, sometimes, you know, my ADD be like, and so it's just very real that someone like Zoran being elected would reverberate out, because we've seen that happen in a number of other places. Like, put it this way. It's like a lot of times you just need one person to do something for folks to realize that it's possible. And there's been mad people who, until that one person did it, were thinking, man, I want to do that. I just, you know, they just didn't have the moxie, or maybe they just didn't have the money, or maybe they just didn't have the support, or maybe they just didn't have the gusto, but they just needed like someone else. And then that one person does it. And then them 11 people are now like, I can do it. So, like, that's just what it is. And it doesn't happen overnight, but we are a part of a long timeline. And I think one of the biggest things that I see when people say, how do we fix this so you don't have a plan, is I feel like I'm seeing people who are incredibly selfish, who are incredibly self-centered, and who simply don't understand that we are a part of a long story, a narrative that started long before us and that hopefully will continue long after us. But honestly, by the way that we are treating the earth, it probably won't. So oftentimes when we see people thinking like, oh my God, we need to do a change now, it's like, were you asking how do we fix this a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago? This has needed to be fixed for quite some time. When I mentioned how Obama didn't fix quote unquote fix this, people really got mad at me. Like, well, you're acting like Obama didn't do anything. And it's like, no, Obama did things that affected Black people in positive ways. However, there was nothing done specifically for Black folks. And it would have taken somebody to break the ceiling of doing that in order for it to become practice. And who better than the first Black president? So we are understanding so many things now that we may not have understood before. We are learning so many things now that we may not have learned before. And we are exposed to so many things now that we weren't exposed to before. And that all comes back to also being able to understand who our true enemies are and the reality that power operates a certain way. And when I see folks simply not understanding how power works, it harms their ability to be able to challenge that power. It harms their ability to resist it. You have to understand the way that power shifts, what actually is able to shift power. You have to be able to see the expanse of power, right? And if you can't, you're not going to be able to move past it. Now, when we're talking about like Mao and Castro, and Leninism, there are many different versions of socialism and communism that have existed. But ultimately, I don't feel like we have seen pure communism yet, because we always see somebody at the helm who doesn't want to give up power and who only believes in their ability to carry forth their vision of communism and socialism. And until we see an actual egalitarian, true communal version of that, we are going to be where we are. So I wish all of you, I don't know what to tell you about 4th of July because I think it's nonsense. And I wasn't going to do this, but I guess I changed my mind. I had a poem that premiered on Lene Vinny's show, The People's, what's it called? The People's Brief on Tuesday. And my poem is called Blackness. And the first line of the poem is, are you Black or are you American? Because at this point, you can't be both. And I'll be talking about that poem on my Patreon tomorrow on July 4th. So that's what I'm going to do. So if you'd like to be a part of that conversation, hopefully you will subscribe to my Patreon. It is $5 a month. That $5 goes to supporting the work that I do, which is using education, using laughter, using love to chart our course to collective liberation.